Sounds good. Well, good morning, everyone, and I'm sure some others will trickle in. Feel free to, there is a little bit of a set schedule, but we understand your time, and if you do need to up and leave, please feel free. I didn't mention outside, we also have some of our equipment right out here in the parking lot, our new high water vehicle that's maintained by in the fire department. We have the sand rake that we use to rake the sand nearly every day. There's, I think, a front loader and then a trailer that we just recently had wrapped that reminds people to please don't, when you're doing yard work or mowing your lawn in particular, please don't direct all of your grass clippings out onto the road. I know we see some landscapers do that. We tell them you cannot do that. We do not want any of that going down the storm drains. Obviously, we want to keep our storm drains clean and to be used for water when it rains and not when it storms. But again, I'm Robin Gomez, I'm Madeira Beach City Manager. Thank you all so much for being here. Again, please feel free to visit the vendors the exhibitors outside and a couple of vendors and chat with them, get some information, ask questions. If any of you ever have any questions about anything today, we're going to have speakers discuss hurricane season, sea turtle nesting season, and what we can all do to protect ourselves and certainly our property. And the time to start preparing is now. Hopefully you can start between now and hurricane season typically doesn't begin until June 1st. But you can never know. You can get a storm. Hopefully we won't, but you can get one in May or sometimes in December. That can happen as well because hurricane season's June 1st typically to November 30th. Sea turtle nesting season, May 1st. And that's important that obviously we fill in anybody that goes out to the sand. We leave no trace, leave the sand as we hopefully found it, and that's flat and even, no holes. If we spot well, actually the Clearwater Marine Aquarium will be the first ones to spot any presence or possible presence of any sea turtles out there, any nesting areas, and they will properly mark them. So, but that also begins May 1st, so we just want to remind everybody to be cognizant of that and help us to keep the beach, the sand in our city as clean as possible. So does anybody have any questions so far or any pressing thoughts, ideas? This is a crappy program. You need a different speaker. No, I'm just kidding. Let us know, please, at any time. We are here for all of you. So to do whatever we can to help make Madeira Beach obviously as clean and the great city to live, learn, work, and play. So I'm going to turn it over to a few speakers. We're going to start with hurricanes and hurricane preparation, how to prepare before the storm, what to do when you're told to evacuate, please evacuate, then what to do during the storm, what happens, and then what happens after the storm, and then we'll jump into the sea turtle nesting season. So I will turn it over to few of our speakers, our Public Works Director, Megan Wepfer, and our Fire Chief, Clint Belk.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Megan Wepfer, the Public Works Director. So before a storm, we all know it's kind of panic mode, but the most important thing from a Public Works standpoint is to make sure you prepare your yard. Clean up any debris that you have. We do brush pickup every Wednesday, so trim all your palm fronds, your dead branches, place those at the curb on Wednesday morning, no later than 8 a.m., and we will pick those up. So hopefully before we go into hurricane season, we have a huge push, because I would say after any major wind event, the major thing that we are cleaning up off the roadway is the palm fronds. So that will help us tremendously. We have sandbags outside for Madeira Beach residents. In the event we do call for a sandbagging station, we will have that set up over at our Public Works yard. Is everybody familiar with where our Public Works yard is in Madeira Beach? No? Okay. It's over at the marina off of 150th. So 503 150th Avenue. We'll open up the gate to our yard, have a little area set up where we'll help you, we'll assist you if needed, we'll make them if you are not able to. Other than that, from my standpoint, before the storm, that should be covered. Any questions for me? No? Chief?
All right. I'm Clint Belk, Fire Chief, Madeira Beach Fire Department. So before the storm, the fire department, we will assess the staffing equipment days before the anticipated landfall. We'll have everything ready to go under control. Our new high water vehicle downstairs, That's considered a brush truck, but we got it for a high water event because I don't know how many of y'all were here for Tropical Storm Ida. It was just a tropical storm, but it was the perfect storm with the incoming tide and the negative flood surge, or positive flood surge, excuse me. We experienced flooding. So me and the fire inspector, Raul, we're in the station having to dispatch our guys, and they're telling us that they can't even get to these houses. The water was so deep. So that's why we have that high water vehicle now. Um, Citizens, everybody's encouraged to follow any evacuation orders, or you can take it upon yourself to evacuate. You don't have to wait for somebody to tell you. You can just do it upon yourself. Make sure you have food, water, medications, batteries, anything that would be a benefit during a loss of power or a prolonged delay before businesses reopen, city reopens. If you do evacuate and you go to a shelter and you have pets, make sure you go to a pet-friendly shelter. Joe Borey's here. He's with the county, and we work collaboratively together, and he will advise us whenever shelters open, and of course, we'll provide that information to all the residents. We have confirmed our special needs list. If anybody out here is not on the list, but you feel like you need to be, contact the fire department. We'll add you to the list, okay? And like Megan said, make sure you secure barbecue grills, cut down your trees, limbs, what have you. Make sure there's nothing that a wind event could possibly take and make the event even worse. But before the storm, that's pretty much the life safety aspect from the fire department. And with that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Chief. Chief is a good partner with us. Really appreciate all Madeira Beach does and their administration as well, too. So for us, we have 3 tenets. It's know your risk, have a plan, and stay informed. So before a storm, this is exactly what you should be doing. It's getting information, the latest information, making sure that you're ready. Your risk here, if you're a Madeira Beach resident, is your evacuation level A is storm surge. I think we all saw what storm surge did down south of us, and I do have a PowerPoint in a little bit I want to show. Then just want to talk about the evacuation order process as well too. So we're watching the storm as soon as it's starting and then waiting for that 5-day cone, and we have what we call our storm activation lead time checklist. We go through all these things, over 140 items that we want to hit before the arrival of tropical storm force winds. So what we're looking for is to make sure that we get our evacuation order out so that you all have enough time to pack up and leave Madeira Beach and go to your safe location. And we're doing that because of the life-threatening storm surge that will be coming here. We modeled that storm surge. We try to not to over or under evacuate, but we're looking at that. And I assure you that if we're saying that storm surge is coming here, ordering evacuation, you're going to see life-threatening storm surge here. So we're taking a look at that, and we're backing that up for all those hours because we have to make our recommendation. We come up what we call our bed, mid, and worst case scenarios. So we're watching the storm, waiting for the last forecast before we have to go before the policy group, the leadership, present to them our recommendation. Then they have to go before the Board of County Commissioners because they have the authority and delegation to actually order the evacuation order. So we have to back all that up, get that ordered, and then make sure that we do it while there's still time to get on the news. So we're not going to order an evacuation at 2 a.m. We're not going to wake you up at 4:45 a.m. I promise. Unless. So that's going to be, when everybody's awake and everybody can get that information so we can start the evacuation order because we have to pick up special needs. We have to get the medical facilities ready. We have to make sure that you have enough time to leave. And the best time to leave is early. Everybody's like, oh, I'm not leaving because of the traffic. Well, if that's a concern, you should leave a little earlier. And one of the things, too, you might want to consider as we get into the heat of the season is keeping your car tank half filled with gas. So this way you don't need as much gas when you go to the gas station. And at least if you had to go a little farther, you have at least a half a tank of gas in there. and that will prepare you well. And I know everybody saw the flooding down there in South Florida. We didn't run out of gas. There was no other events in the country that was preventing gas. They just couldn't get in there with the gas, with the tankers, right, because of all the flooding, and that's why there was some pressure for that. And that's what happens during a hurricane is those same tankers got to ride the same roads that everybody's evacuating and getting back and forth and keeping filled up. Just it gets very slow. So keep your tanks half filled. Keep your propane tanks filled. So post-storm, if you're able to come back home to something, you have that, your barbecue grill filled, and you can at least cook on that if you don't have water or power, okay? And we've been lucky the last few storms. Yes, we've lost power, but we have never lost water and sewer, right? And when you lose both of those things, that could be make it a hardship coming back to your place. So just keeping that in mind, having that kit as well too. I know it sounds old, you hear that all the time, but those really help out when you have nothing as well too. Even if the shell of your house is there, at least you have your kit of some things that you need. So that's what you should be doing before the storm. And
Thank you, Joe. Also, hopefully everybody here, before we go to a question, has the Ready Pinellas app. Are all of you familiar with Ready Pinellas? Pretty much everything that Joe just stated is in that app. So I encourage all of you to, if you don't have it, download it, take a look at it. Tells you all the evacuation zones, again, your risk, how to get involved, special needs, et cetera. Yes?
18 inches of water.
Yeah.
So you
Foot and a half, half a
18
meter.
inches of water, it's above your electrical outlets in there. So yes, Etta was a Madeira Beach experience. You had the most homes flooded and things like that. You're very low. Came in and, it came in, as the chief said, I think at full moon, high tide. It was supposed to stay way offshore. Then it did that kind of a truce angle into just north of Citrus there and pushed all that water up in through the intercoastal. We flooded really from the back than we did from the beach, right? And then folks had 2 inches or so of water in their home, and what did they do? And some new renters and things like that, they left, or they saw their cars flooding and they went out into deeper water and went and tried to rescue. It's too late then, and that's the same thing with the storm surges come. When you see the water rising, it's too late. I was dealing with a healthcare facility the other day, and she's telling me all the things she does to watch the storm, which was none of it, which was listening to us, and we emailed them and called them extensively. She goes out and looks at the canal. And I'm like, well, okay, what are you going to do when you see the canals rising and it's flooded? Well, it's too late. If you're seeing dry land in front of you in the canal, you don't know, you could be surrounded by a donut. It's too late. So yes, 18 inches of water, and we will notify extensively that you need to evacuate.
Thanks, Joe. And then after or during the storm, we also have our Community Development Director, Jenny Rowan, to
Sure.
add some additional info.
So I'll be talking about after the storm. There's 3 things that I'll be going over is the post-damage assessment, and then building permits, and as well as the FEMA 50% rule. So after the storm, you might see Public Works, Megan, driving around, them out on the street. You might also see the planning and building departments. We're lurking around, we're in our cars, we're doing a damage assessment. Usually we just stay in our cars. Usually we don't get out. We're doing a quick and dirty assessment of all the buildings within the city. So we drive up and down every street, looking at every single property. We then report this while we're out in the field on tablets and our phones to the county using their software. We can then use that data to show us where the vulnerable spots of the city are and then further assess those areas. And after the storm, you might see this paper that's outside. You can pick one up. You must apply for your emergency permit within 24 hours, and emergency permits are leaking roofs, leaking doors and windows, downed power lines, and non-functioning air conditioners. And we'd like to remind you that all after-the-fact fees are also in effect for unpermitted work, and that's 5 times the fee. So you really want to get your permits in, your permit applications in. And the building and planning departments, after a storm event, we stop everything. We focus fully on the permits. So we want you to get in and out of there as soon as possible. We understand that's very important.
And then depending on the the intensity of the damage, then the city may waive permit fees as well. And then we will, of
Yes.
course, let everybody know. And I think we've done that at
During
least
edit.
once
Yes.
before, maybe twice. So.
Yes, thank you, Robin. And then the FEMA 50% rule, that's very important to keep in mind. So if your property, if your house is not up to floodplain standards, so say if your home is at grade, you're not up to floodplain standards, you must adhere to the dreaded FEMA 50% rule. So what that is you can only improve your property up to 50% of the depreciated value of your structure within 12 months. Madeira Beach is cumulative 12 months. So say if your home, the depreciated value of just your structure is $100,000, then your FEMA 50% is $50,000. And say in January you took out a permit for a roof, say that's $10,000, you have $40,000 up until January the 2nd you can improve your house up to that $40,000 in value. That's really important to keep in mind when we're fasting hurricane season because those FEMA 50% rules are still in effect. And you can also get your FEMA 50% number at Pinellas County Properties Appraiser's website. That's usually how we get our 50% when a building permit comes in and we're reviewing it. We also accept third-party appraisals, and those generally come in a little higher.
Thank you, Jenny. After the storm, anything else, Chief?
Yeah, I have some during the storm as well.
During and after?
If you do choose to stay, I can't stress this enough, just be advised that there will come a time where your 911 calls will not be answered and we will not respond. That is a go, no-go determination that I will make, and I'll base that on the safety of the city's fire department. If we experience floodwaters, make sure you turn off your main breaker. I know it'll be an inconvenience, but riding it out until the power actually goes out, that's not what you need to do. If you have a generator and solar panels, make sure you kill the power to those as well. And if you choose to stay, just be prepared to ride it out, knowing all this information that if you get nervous, you get scared, or something happens, whatever, the fire department's not going to respond until it's safe to respond anyways. And then after the storm, at that point, 911 calls hold, and we'll start to respond to those calls afterwards. And we'll begin a damage assessment, searching residences if it's deemed necessary. So there's a tree that fell on a roof. We'll gain access to that residence and search it just to make sure there's nobody in there. And wait for floodwaters to recede before you turn on your main breaker and your generator, solar panels, what have you. You know, you'll know when it's safe. You won't have to be told. You're not standing in a puddle of water flipping your main breaker. You know, water, electricity, they don't mix. And during Tropical Storm Ida, we responded to so many false alarms because 18 inches is your outlet, and when the floodwaters reaches that, obviously it's going to short circuit. People get scared. They call a structure fire. So then you have 4 fire trucks responding to your house for something that could have been avoided. But, Joe, you have anything for during and after? All right.
Hold on to that.
Okay.
I think the chief was being nice. I might think I'm going to be a little more dire. All right. This is a challenge. Oh, I missed. Sorry. All right, so I mentioned that to know your risks, have a plan, and stay informed. And, you know, having a plan is being here today. I'll touch on stay informed in a second. But, the Bear Islands, you have your unique challenges, the high winds, Chief mentioned power outages, the water service goes out, there's no fire service as well too, except for what they have in their tanks, flooding, water spouts turned into tornadoes. But here's what flooding looks like. So there at Ian, there was 14 foot of storm surge there. And that's what 14 foot of storm surge looks like. That's unsurvivable storm surge, right? And then the devastation it caused, you talk about 18 inches. After 18, 2 foot of water will start to move a vehicle down the road. So there's the impact of that. There's 9 foot of water where that lady is standing right there, that TV reporter. It's a good 3D example of what that is. That's over your head. So we heard from folks, and Ian, our team went down there and all that. Some folks said that, they thought it was 15 foot of storm surge. No, it's 15 foot of storm surge, and it's above ground. So when I said 18 inches, it's above ground. So take Etta. We thought it was going to be 4 to 6 foot of storm surge, and I've lived here all my life. So that, you got the seawalls, you got a cap over the seawalls. It floods from the back this way. It doesn't overtop the beach until it's real storm surge. We got 5 to 7, right? And that's where it was like, okay, it wasn't life-threatening. We messaged that. We're going to do better next time. We have some graphics we're going to put out. But take a look on the right there. What happens is our models and all that show the water rising. That's the best we can do right now with technology. But for every 4 foot, 5 foot of water, there could be 5 foot, 4 foot of waves on top of that. And that's where that turbidity and that the motion of the water, the power of the water really kicks in when you start seeing wave action just like that. And that's a real picture for me and right there. And then, of course, it's overtopping. And don't be that guy. So, he thinks it's cute. He's in his house. That's about 5 foot of water right there that he's swimming in, trying to live in. And that is nasty water, too. Don't forget. Sure, it's water from off the Gulf, but it's mixing with everything on the roads, the sewers. It's bubbling up. It comes through the storm drains. Anyways, don't be that guy right there. Yeah, he may be, I don't even know if he survived. He's lucky if he did survive. There were 144 deaths for Hurricane Ian. 44 of those were storm surge drowning of people who did not leave. People went into their attics. People stayed on boats, if you can believe that, and they did not survive. So don't be there. Our job is to get you out through that dangerous portion and then bring you back into the county when the chief said, when it's safe to do so. We have road clearing teams, everything ready. I mentioned about the kits, making a plan. And then don't forget your important documents and things like that. I know she mentioned the 50% rule. What we're learning too, what we're seeing is make sure, you have your original house plans and things like that in your insurance. If you've had any upgrades to your home too, having that information as well too, because, to make you whole again, you only get to rebuild to what your house was, right? So you need to show that you had that improvement. So if you've done improvements that you haven't told the city, they're going to be like, well, we don't have record of that. So you're not going to be able to build to that standard that you may have. So having your documentation, pictures, we've seen it for both residents and for both city governments and county governments that didn't have pictures because you're only entitled for reimbursement to bring your stuff up to what you had it before. And stay informed. Use trusted sources. And I say that right in front of Mike, right here. He's a trusted source because he's only rebroadcasting what he sees. You don't see Mike out there saying, I think the hurricane's really going to hit somewhere. He's really good about that. But trusted sources are your local sources, your emergency management department, your city government, your fire chief, those type of sources, and local sources at that. When we have those lines of winter storms coming through, the National Weather Service says, it's going to start raining at 2 p.m. And I always remind my staff, ask for Pinellas. Citrus is, 80 miles away. It'll start raining there at 8 a.m. It could be our drive time home that it's raining that we want to let our public know that's the worst time or tornadic activity. So always local sources, when are the impacts here to Pinellas County, Madeira Beach. So there's some good information there. And then Alert Pinellas, sign up for that as well too. And that's our branding. No matter what happens, you may have heard on TV about the Everbridge, we're going to have a mass notification system. And we are updating our Ready Pinellas mobile app to Ready, Set, Protect right up top so you'll know when it's time to get ready, when it's time to get set, and when time to protect. And that means that you're at your safe shelter location by that time. So it's something new coming to the mobile app. And if you stayed or went somewhere else, if you do have bad winds coming during the storm and things like that, for any hurricane, treat it like a tornado. Go to the center of the room, center of your home, where a hallway, a bathroom, where there's a windowless room. We have a lot of bracing around you and things like that. Do not go back out into the storm surge. Do not worry about your vehicle. If you're seeing it's flooding, it's too late then. That's what insurance is for. If you go into your attic, because we saw that in Ian, bring something that you can cut your way out of the attic, because you're not going to go back down if you go in your attic. And it just floors me. I would never go in my attic. I would go probably outside and climb onto my roof, hold onto the chimney or something on top, brace myself. And then something unique that happened, I don't know how many people have electrical vehicles. Apparently electrical vehicles, when they get flooded with salt water, catch on fire. And they were doing it left and right in Lee County, and the fire department had to go around, figure out who had electrical vehicles by registration, go into their garages and pull them out into the middle of the yard so that they would catch on fire there, and sure enough, they would. So it was dangerous for them to do that. So if you have an electrical vehicle, you might want to just take it. It's expensive too, and get out with that so you're not risking their lives and your property with that. And then, there's since 2017, I'm not saying there's been more storms, but what we're seeing is that there are stronger storms. So, that September, October time, that's jet fuel out there in the Gulf, and that's what's making those storms. That was, nobody believed that Ian was on the other side of Cuba, was all of a sudden, a blob. It was going to pop out, and the Weather Service first forecast, the first 5-day cone showed it perfectly going into Lee County as a major hurricane, and it did. So they're getting the track. They're really better with the track from years ago. And now the intensification we're seeing with these storms. So, Michael, it was gaining strength. Every yard that it had of Gulf, it would have been a Category 6 if it had any more, and the same with Ian, as we're seeing now that it was a Cat 5. So please heed the warning. I don't want you to be, ground zero here. Fort Myers, could be Treasure Island, could have been Madeira Beach, could have been Indian Shores and all that. And that was a 40-mile wide swath of the center, the worst part of the storm. So that is from tip of St. Pete Beach all the way up to Clearwater Beach. So just keep that in mind. And please heed the warning of the chief, of your city, and of the county as well, too.
Thank you, Joe. We're talking about reducing your risk of having a life-changing event. So what I would like to do now is introduce our fire inspector, Raul Perez. He's going to talk about a new program that we have. We implemented this about a year ago. It's a community risk reduction program, and we'll let him speak on the different topics that we have for you guys.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Raul Perez. I'm the fire inspector with Madeira Beach Fire Department. We have several different programs underneath the community risk reduction, and some of those things, they come in a pretty good time, especially before the storm. So, like, one of the things that we do is we will put up new smoke detectors in your homes, okay? These are by Kitty. They'll last 10 years. All you need to do is just give me a call at the fire department, and I will schedule it out with you, and I will come and install it for you. The only thing we ask is that you just sign a piece of paper so that way we can restock the ones that we give you. We can give up to 3 per household, okay? So that's one of them. Another thing we do have is a file of life. If you guys never seen one of these, it's a really good source of information for us as first responders and for the hospitals and for the deputies that comes to your home. And what this is a lot of it, your information, and you could take more than just one. So I think everybody in your household should at least have one. But what this is your information, medical information, allergies, phone numbers, emergency contacts, your medication, what you've been diagnosed with, so on and so forth, so that, God forbid, we find you and you're unconscious, we know all the answers right here, right? And it's easy for us, it's easier for the hospitals to get to know who you are and how to treat you. Another thing, too, we have is the invisible killer, carbon monoxide. So if you have gas in your homes, try to stay up to date with that. If you guys, just the other day, somebody had called and said, I think I smell gas, but it also smells like a dead animal. So I went out there and it was a leaking gas. It was coming out of the tank, and it was just, the connection wasn't good. It looks like it was rusting out, okay? So that's something you guys can do. Just give me a call. I'll come down, or I'll send the guys in the fire truck, but usually I'll come down if they're not too busy, and take a look. We also have gas meters that we can check for other things as well. Another thing here we have is safety for the older consumers. And it says older consumers, but really we could use it for everybody, right? This is a home safety check, and you can do this before the storm comes or after. You know, if you want me to come down and I can do it for you, I can. We'll go over the different things that we should be looking at, right? Apart from what the building department is going to be doing and everything, this is just very minor to compare to what they do, right? But it's great if you get it done before the storm, okay? This also, it just basically, if you have a chimney, we'll take a look at chimney. If you have a fire extinguisher, I'll take a look at that. A lot of the fire extinguishers out there are pretty old, expired. You'll be amazed that somehow some of these people have extinguishers for 20 years. They should be changed out every one. The other program we do have is a CPR class that I teach. That's once every other month. But we're probably going to start changing that now. We do have a lot of people that are very interested in CPR. It's through American Heart Association, and we do have 2 instructors here. And sometimes the guys in the back will help me out if it's a super large group. That is free to the residents of Madeira Beach, and if you're not a resident, it's $25 for the class. Class takes about 4 hours long, and so far from what I've heard, it's been a pretty good class. So another thing we do have is we do give life jackets. We do giveaways for children, infants, adults. So if you can't swim, we at least want you to be safe in the water. We do have a lot of water rescues. If you guys haven't seen, we do have a boat. We do have surfboards and everything. We do get called a lot for water rescues. So if you or a family member, kids, grandkids, sons, daughters, need a life vest, come down to the fire department and I can get you one. Call first just to see if we have your size, and if not, give me about a week or 2 to get some in for you. And I think on top of that, that's all I've got for you guys. You guys have any questions about anything? From me. We have quite a few at our table outside. All right. These, they'll go on your refrigerator. We'll always take a look at your refrigerator. I know there's these, and then there's the vial of life, and those are the old ones that you put in a little medication vial and put it in the freezer or refrigerator, and we'll take a look at it. And they used to give stickers with those, so that way we know as we're coming into your home where to look for it. All right, but these are pretty simple. We just stick them on the refrigerator, and that's it. So if you need more than one, you're more than welcome to take more, okay? All right. Thank you guys for your time.
You know, again, everybody, this is a community risk reduction program. It's literally free. You take advantage of it. You know, it's a resource that you have in your own city. So we encourage you to, you know, take advantage of this. Pick our brains. If you have any questions, give us a call. Is Lee Spann? Is he here? Oh, I'm sorry. Are you ready to? All right, let's do this. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Social media and such. Okay. Hi, everybody. My name is Lee Spann. I'm the morning meteorologist at Channel 8. How many of you have lived here for a long period of time, first of all? Okay, so you're a little storm weary at this point, like you kind of know how things go. So we're just really kind of want to build on what you've already been hearing about today, which is how to get ready and how to visualize and think about storms whenever we're on TV talking for either hours and hours and hours on end. So we'll just kind of start going and we'll move along. Let's see. Okay, so the things we're going to talk about today are the threats. And I'm actually going to talk a little bit about the hurricane forecast this year and how to think about that and how to actually use that, as well as El Nino development, and then of course that all-important hurricane kit. So our threats, there are, with any hurricane, we know that it's a storm surge. That's the killer. That's the one that we are always most concerned about. That's why we want people to get away from that. And then when strong winds, and then you guys don't have to worry about the inland flooding so much unless you've been evacuated to inland areas. And then tornadoes also always. So we're going to go individually about those. So we know the Saffir-Simpson scale will always say, okay, this is going to be a Category 1 hurricane, but what does that mean? So this is now sort of the effects of that. So at a Category 1, there will be some roofs that are lost. You're going to start to see those blue tarps coming up after a Category 1 hurricane. By a Category 2 hurricane, that's when we start to see real mobile home damage. So there are a lot of mobile home parks in all of Pinellas. I just sat down for a long interview with the Pinellas County Emergency Management Director, and that was something that she talked about, not only the number of mobile home parks that she has to consider when they start calling for evacuations in this area, but also the number I do, first of all, before I move on, I'm training for a marathon and I ran 20 miles this morning. So if my brain is my brain might be a little bit slow, and I do apologize for that because anyway. So I am doing well, but anyway, my brain is a little bit slow today. So once we get into Category 3, so that's where we start calling them a major hurricane. So anything Category 3, 4, or 5 becomes something that we call major. And that's where you start to see even some of those well-built homes suffer major loss, major damage. And that's where you're going to have to start, thinking about all of the improvements that you've already done on your home, making sure you have those permits and have those that documentation, so that when you get over a Category 3 or higher, that you're really going to have to, even in a well-built home, have a lot of rebuilding to do. Then we get to Category 4, and that's what we were at the last slide that Joe was showing. Joe, right? That there's been so many more Category 4 and 5s hitting the Gulf Coast in the last decade or so, and that's just because the Gulf of Mexico gets extremely warm, and we get that rapid intensification. He mentioned Michael, and that's one of the ones that, the northern Gulf Coast, they see a lot more of the storms. As they go up from the Yucatan Peninsula, they go straight north, oftentimes up around the Panhandle. And for us, it's a little harder for it to make that right-hand turn. We'll talk more about that coming up. But the fact that they didn't leave, many people didn't leave from Michael because they said, I've gone through Category 1 and 2, that's what this one's supposed to be, so I'm okay. The problem was that the emergency managers want you to think one category higher. So, the 1s and 2s and even a couple of 3s that they've seen was no match when it was a Category 5. And yes, that wasn't necessarily always forecast to be a Category 5 when Michael made landfall around the Panama City area, but it was expected to be a strong Category 4. And then it had that rapid intensification. So whatever number that we call for and what is actually being forecast for, we're going to ask you to prepare for one category higher. And even if you've gone through a 2 or a 3 before, know that could be a 4 or 5 now with the way that the Gulf of Mexico is setting up. So that's where you get, and this is just wind. Oh, by the way, that's a new thing too. The Saffir-Simpson scale used to be wind and storm surge. The National Hurricane Center over time has realized that they are not always symbiotic, that there may be a very strong hurricane without much storm surge, or there could be a relatively weak hurricane wind-wise with a very large storm surge. So they're like, we cannot combine these two. So now if you hear about the Saffir-Simpson scale, it is only about the wind speeds. So that's why at a category 4, it's widespread damage, widespread just trees just knocked over in large swaths, and widespread no power, of course. But again, this doesn't even take into account what the storm surge is doing, because they are not always going to be, a category 4 storm surge might look like a category 2 storm surge, and a category 2 hurricane may look like a category 4 storm surge. But once we get to category 5, it's bad. And they mentioned it could be a category 6. That had been at least thrown out as something. Do we need, as these storms are getting stronger, do we need a category 6? And the answer to that from the National Hurricane Center was no, because category 5 is complete devastation. So who cares if it's higher than that? Nothing else is going to be left, so we don't need another category. If you hit 156 mile an hour winds and you have a storm surge, it's going to look the same. If it's stronger wind, stronger and higher storm surge, we don't need another category. It's just 156 miles and over, complete devastation. So that's why we won't get a category 6, but just know that it's only because at 5, it's bad enough that we don't have, there doesn't need to be another category. And I did like the picture from Ian that not only is the storm surge, but then you get the storm tide on top of that. So those winds, those waves on top. So this is a good look. The 15-foot storm surge may mean one thing, but then there's another 2 feet where you get those waves. So, okay, you think they're calling for a 10-foot storm surge. I'm at a 15-foot elevation. Don't forget about the waves on top of that storm surge. And 1 cubic yard of water, not much, 3 feet by 3 feet, weighs 1,700 pounds. And it's moving. So think about a box weighing 1,700 pounds pushing against your house, and there's a whole bunch of those boxes. That's why when people say that they want to stay in their homes when they're told to evacuate, because they want to try to protect their homes. I can't say it enough. Well, what are you gonna do? You can't hold up walls. I mean, I understand you want to protect the things in your home, and that's where the pre-planning comes in. Protect the things early, get them out of the way, and then you get out of the way, because you have no chance against 1,700 pounds every cubic yard. So when you say you want to protect your home and you want to stay there, if you're here, I'm probably preaching to the choir. You know that you're going to need to leave. But if you could spread the word to your neighbors throughout the next couple of weeks as we get closer to hurricane season, that would really make my job and their job so much easier. If people just understood that once that water starts coming in, there isn't anything you can do. You can't protect your house. You can only hope that you've evacuated and that there might be a home to come home to. And so just tell people that, ask them how they plan to protect their home if the walls start caving in. So again, I'm pretty sure all of you guys know to evacuate, but let's spread this out. Obviously that destroys any buildings, and you've all heard the saying, right? Run from the water, hide from the wind. So if you are in a well-built home out of an evacuation zone, then you need to get into that, into a hunker down mode, which means if you have friends and relatives in inland areas or go to a hotel, then that's where you hide from the wind. But if you're in an evacuation zone, like I said, I just sat down with the Pinellas EOC director, and they don't take those evacuations lightly. I mean, they are thinking about what they call clearance time. So in an evacuation of just she said it may take, what they think their clearance time is for Pinellas County is 17 hours to get everybody in evacuation zone A out of harm's way. It can get up to 50 hours. And so that's why she said there might be an evacuation for your area before we're even under a hurricane warning, because warnings come out 36 to 48 hours, watches come out 48 hours, and warnings come out 36 hours before hurricane force winds. Well, if they wait till 48 hours, they're way past. So don't necessarily just think, oh, we're not under a hurricane warning. If you're told to evacuate, there are people all behind the scenes talking and communicating and saying this area needs to go now, because then they're out of the way for the next group of people. So just think about what you're doing as a domino effect. If you're told to evacuate, they didn't do it frivolously. They've talked to the school system. Everyone has to work together to get those evacuations done. How many of you have heard of the right front quadrant? Okay, there we go. So you're going to hear meteorologists talk about that a lot. So the worst storm surge and oftentimes the strongest winds, but not necessarily in that eye wall. Certainly the strongest storm surge is going to be in the right front quadrant. So what in the world does that mean? So if you were to take the storm and cut it into fours, put a little plus on it, and then it's the direction that the storm is moving. So for us, let's say it's moving right toward Pinellas County. So the right front quadrant would be where the passenger seat is. There. That's where, because I keep wanting to walk over there and touch it like I do on TV. So I guess the microphone is here. Winds circulate in a counterclockwise way around the center of any low pressure, and a hurricane is an area of low pressure that's very, very strong. So if you think about everything moving in that counterclockwise way, then for us, that southern side is going to be where the winds are coming onshore and pushing that water from the Gulf of Mexico farther and farther inland. Now, look up in Citrus County with this graphic, where are those winds coming there? They're actually going offshore. So they're going to have zero, sort of a negative storm surge. They're not going to have any storm surge while this particular situation is happening. Because you got to think about it's not always going to be the southern side, because if this storm was going due north, it would be the east side. And if it was going west, it would be the north side. So that's why I always think of it like a car. Wherever the passenger seat is of that car is going to be who gets, unfortunately, the worst of it. So that's why, speaking of just Pinellas County, you have a very long coastline. And 1 or 2 miles will determine who gets, almost no storm surge and who gets the worst of it. So those storms can make, has anyone during Ian, was anyone watching the wobble tracker on WFLA? So we had it online constantly, and it just showed how that storm went up and north and south, north and south, north and south. And those little wobbles would have made a huge difference on which part of Fort Myers had almost no storm surge and which one had the worst of it, because it's not going to be that far of a difference. So that's what you're always going to look for. You're going to say, for us, it's the storm, it's the area to the center and south of where that storm, the eye makes landfall. I don't have a graphic about this, so I'm just going to start talking about it, because I mentioned that the northern Gulf of Mexico, the coastline there, they get hit a lot more than we do. And one of the reasons, it's not because of an Indian burial ground. Please, please tell your friends and family that's not a thing, please. We are in an interesting spot of the Gulf of Mexico, because it has to come from, there's only a small little area between, Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula. So as it comes up, it has to make this sort of right-hand turn, or turn to the east. And sometimes that can happen just because of the way, storm steering currents in the atmosphere. But often the steering currents, they've already been pushing it north out of the Caribbean. It's just going to keep pushing it north into places like Louisiana, Mississippi, Alabama, and the Panhandle. We, in our area, get a lot more concerned about October storms. In fact, the only major hurricane to ever hit Tampa Bay was late October, when the rest of the country starts laying back from their hurricane preps. Because what can happen is, while that storm is doing just what all of the storms have been doing in July, August, and September, it's moving north toward the Panhandle. And by October, especially mid to late October, we start getting those first cold fronts. And that's the thing that can turn the storm from going due north to due east and doing this. So yes, this can happen in August. Charlie happened in August, just the steering currents brought it in and it was able to make that turn to the east. But it's a lot harder for those steering currents to do that. What's not hard is for a cold front to come and take the Gulf of Mexico is still a bath at that point. It's still 90-something degree water. So the water is still warm enough, and those cold fronts can come and shift it to the east. It is less likely, which is why we have fewer than the northern Gulf of Mexico, but it's not, as Fort Myers has seen, it's not a 100% that it's never going to come here. And there was about a 20-mile difference as Ian came off of Cuba that kept it from being here and there. So it's not a lot of distance. So we know it's going to come one of these days, which is why we have this, and this is why you're here. So thank you for being here. Okay, so now we'll just some what I call sort of hidden dangers. Because you guys, you hear about it, you live in Madeira Beach, you live in Paradise, so you have to prepare for Paradise. But you may have your friends and family in other places, inland areas. And unfortunately, about a quarter of the U.S. hurricane deaths come from inland counties because 50% of freshwater flooding. So as you decide on where you're going to go when you've been told to evacuate, which you're going to do, you have to assess that risk too. For instance, with Ian, what did we see in Orlando? I would say we got to stop sending people to Orlando because then Charlie did the same thing, and Ian did. Irma did the same thing, and then Ian now as well. I'm just kidding. You can go to Orlando, but they had major flooding. They had 2 feet of rain in a very short period of time in places, and so as you make your plan to go inland, or as you have friends and relatives away from the coast, that's what we usually tell you to do, right? If you can get to your friends and relatives in Wesley Chapel, if you can get out of the hurricane evacuation zone and into a sturdy house, you don't have to go to Atlanta. You don't have to go to, way up north. You just got to get a few miles away from the storm surge. But also you need to assess those risks too, because if there's right next to a retention pond, we could see that water rise pretty quickly. And then there's always tornadoes. With any landfalling, tropical storm, barely even a tropical depression. What happens is there's already sort of this spin in the atmosphere associated with a tropical system. Then you add the friction of those bands that wrap around it with going from the water to the land, and then even farther inland, there's still that twist that already exists, and it's hot and it's humid, and then you add the spin in the atmosphere and you get tornadoes. And I think when Tropical Storm Debbie came through, the one death we had was like Citrus County or DeSoto County because there was a tornado that killed a mom and her baby. So yes, there's the immediate coastline that everyone thinks about, but there are these hidden dangers that you need to think about as you go to evacuate. So now we're changing topics. So was there any questions about sort of the threats and what that means for you and maybe at your home? So a couple of things about the forecast. Yes, this year they are predicting, so the Colorado State University, they've been forecasting hurricanes now for decades. People always laugh that it's in Colorado, but it's the same research exists, papers exist, anywhere. And they are technically forecasting slightly below average. So 13 named storms. Storms get names when they become tropical storms. And as opposed to 14 now, which is the average. Those averages are coming up as we get more hurricanes every year. Hurricanes, they're forecasting 6 of those. The average is 7. And 2 major hurricanes, category 2, 3, or 5. 2, 3, 4, or 5. They're predicting 2 of those as opposed to 3. So the biggest factor really is that El Nino is developing. So we typically get fewer hurricanes during an El Nino year. We've been in a very strong La Nina pattern for 2 years. So we typically get a little more excited about an El Nino year for hurricanes. Now that also means we typically have more severe weather in the spring. So come next spring, we could actually see more severe weather, but that's not the expo that we're at. So just right now we're going to focus on the fact that El Nino typically brings fewer storms, hurricanes, versus La Nina. So between 1995 and 2016, on average during La Nina years, which is what we've had the past 2 hurricane season, 8.4 hurricanes, not named storms, which we know that we have a lot of those, but the ones that reach 74 miles per hour and as a hurricane. If it's a neutral year, it's about 7.8, which that's the average is 8. And then El Nino, look at that, it's 4.7. So with everything being connected in the world, when the strong winds off the coast of South America, the Pacific coast of South America, slow down during El Nino years, it warms up the water. It's a whole process. But anyway, upwelling, colder water is down below, right? And so when there's stronger winds, it moves that top water out of the way, and all this cool air usually comes up right along the coast of South America. For some reason, during El Nino years, those stronger winds stop, and so the water then gets warmer because it's the top layer gets warmed up by the sunshine, and it's much, much warmer. That one changes the climate of the entire world because everything is connected. So as that warms up, that causes multiple things to change. It's why we have a wetter and stormier spring, but it also causes very strong winds across the Atlantic. So as storms start to form, those strong winds, what we call shear, literally shear the top, just like you would shear a sheep. It shears the top of these storms off so they don't get too strong. Just wonderful, right? We love that. That's why only 4.7 reach hurricane status. But this is all just facts, okay? But it only takes one. 1992 was a very strong El Nino year. In fact, the first hurricane didn't even form until late August, and it was Andrew. So we can't predict where those 4 storms are going to form and how strong they're going to be and where they're going to hit. So yes, it's interesting that there may be fewer storms this year because of El Nino, but it doesn't mean that our planning and our preparations change at all. So, this year, if we had told you that there were only going to be 7 named storms that whole hurricane season, would you have prepared the same way if you were living in Homestead? Maybe not. But now you see why. Yes, we can show you the forecast, and it's interesting, and it's kind of, we talk about it a lot, but the fact that your preparation must be the same, because I'm sure the people in Miami and Homestead wish that they were as prepared. So now we'll talk about preparation, which I'm sure we've mentioned some already. But this is what you can be doing weeks before a hurricane. Now, for instance, where we are weeks before hurricane season. Talked about making a plan. I have a tree trimmer coming to my house on Tuesday. Go ahead, get those trees that are maybe right over your home that could easily fall and just kind of puncture your roof. Go ahead and trim those back away from your roof and then get your roof inspected. Make sure that it is ready. These are things that, you have to call the people. They have to come out. This is not something that you're able to do when you see a hurricane, invest out there that might be moving our way. These are things that you need to just do in the spring, knowing that June 1st is coming every year. Just make sure that these are done. Garage door securing. So one of the things about garage doors that are not hurricane proof is that when the garage door fails, what we have seen is that because it is such a large opening to your home, if there's strong enough winds that disable or open up that garage, it pops the roof off of your home because the wind whooshes, kind of rushes in this large opening, and that the only place that air can go then is right off the top. So garage doors are very important. So they have plenty of them that are wind resistant and can withstand hurricane force winds. And there are actually ways that you can sort of fix your old garage door. But if money allows, going ahead and upgrading to a hurricane wind resistant garage door, it's very important because, again, when that garage door fails, then your roof fails and the house is much more damaged. Familiarize yourself with social media. I really appreciate this. Couple of things I always say, it's my little PSA about social media. Yes, you should be only listening to your municipalities, your fire department, your local news organization, Mike's weather page, so that there are, plenty of people out there who are speculating, who aren't from here. It's all on social media, and it's sort of, fire hose of information coming at you. So Facebook especially, but almost all of them now, work on an algorithm. So if today, over the next couple of weeks, you can interact with these, start liking posts, more of those posts are going to show up in your feed so that you actually get them without going straight to our pages. So go ahead, familiarize, start liking, and then once Facebook sees that you like that, it's going to start sending more of that information to you. So that's the first thing. Go ahead weeks before and start interacting with your trusted sources. But also know, as I'm sure that if you've all used social media now, because of the algorithm, you sometimes get a post on your page, on your feed that's from yesterday. Like, oh, Sally did this yesterday. How interesting. But if that's a hurricane forecast or hurricane information from yesterday, you do not need to look at it or share it, because you need to always look at the date that it was posted. And if it says 16 hours ago, please don't share that. You can click on the organization and go to their website and get the latest forecast track. I really worry that, you think, well, I would never purposely tell someone the wrong thing. But if you shared yesterday's forecast track, you are telling the wrong people to be prepared, because we know that especially early on, those forecast tracks change pretty drastically. So always look at the time that it was posted. Even if it's coming from these trusted sources, it's still wrong information if it came out 16, 24 hours ago. So just always pay attention to the time. So sign up for these municipal alerts. They've shown you which ones it is. And then check on the hurricane supplies. 1 gallon of water per person per day. That's sort of the main thing. Doesn't have to be bought water. You can fill up every plasticware you have in your house. I actually have something called a water bob. You can order it from Amazon, and it's basically just a huge bladder that fits in your tub. And then you fill it up, and then there's a little spout, and then that's how much water you have left. So 1 gallon per person per day. And for your pet, 3 days worth of food, 3 to 7 days worth of food. The first 72 is up to you. If you've never heard that saying before, you got 72 hours, if it's bad, before the cavalry kind of can come in and start bringing you, food and water. So what do you need for 3 days? What do you and your family need for 3 days if no one can come? How can you live? Make sure you have something to eat. You have a can opener. Please, that's a non-electric can opener. Blankets, pillows, that all kind of makes sense. Obviously, any sort of hand sanitizer, because if water doesn't work, you still want to be sanitized. Cell phone and extra battery. Now, there are also solar-powered batteries now for your phone, like where you can, charge your phone from solar power. But also we've gotten so used to these, to our cell phones and to our smartphones, and that's basically how we're going to get information to you and from you. So what do you need in order to keep that going for 3 days or before you can go? So, and hopefully that's where you'll be watching the news on that phone, because, if power goes out. So have either extra batteries or only use one phone and this day and this one the next day, or however it is, just kind of think about what you and your family need to keep those cell phones going. Cash, because if electricity doesn't work, then neither do, you can't use your credit card and you can't go to the ATM. So have some cash in that hurricane kit, and tell your husband not to go in and get that cash, because mine has been known to sneak in there. Like, that is our emergency cash. And of course, all your emergency documents, weather radio, always good, because again, you get only the information that you need for your area. I think that's it. Any questions? Yes. June 1st to November 30th. So it's a long, it ramps up through June and then sort of ramps down during November. But we're starting to see more and more hurricanes even before June 1st now, not hurricanes, but named storms. So, well, June 1st. Yeah, right. It might start in May. Yes. Yes. Okay. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you being here and getting ready. Tell your friends. Tell your friends.
Thank you, Lee. Great job. The common theme I think everybody's starting to see is the importance of evacuation. I think every one of us has, spoke on that topic. We have a couple more speakers, and then we're going to transition into the sea turtle protection and preservation aspect of the program. But next up, we have Mike from Mike's Weather Page. Great resource to have. Thank you, Mike.
All right, how's this work? All right, good job. So I'm over there frantically trying to change my presentation because I think that was like 99% of it. So yeah, I'll be really short. That's hard for me to do. If you follow me online, I like to talk a lot. That's what my daughter says. Every time I'm done doing a live, she's like, "Daddy, you talk a lot." It's our little code here. Let's see if we get. All right. Trying to make that bigger here. Can you F11 me? It's all right. All right, so anyway, I'm Mike from Mike's Weather Page. There you go. I think that's Edge. Get F11. Let's see if this works. There you go. Magic. Oh, one more time. Cool. You're supposed to trust us. We can't work computers here. All right, so I'm going to try to mix it up a little bit since she did such a great job covering a lot of the basics. Let's see here. There we go. All right, so who am I? So my name is Mike. I do a little weather show in the morning. I'm an amateur hobbyist, but I'm a local guy, so this is my home. Kind of got national now, but you look at the pictures up there a little bit. I started my hobby basically in 2004. That's when we had our big year here in Florida, and it pretty much turned it into more. Here it is, 2022. I'm still doing it. Last year, I was storm chasing inside of Ian, and was on CNN during the middle of the storm with Aaron Burnett, and Fox had a cool thing on. So it's been a really fun ride. I take it very serious, though, and like I said, this is my home. So I'm a little Pinellas County biased for sure. The little keyboard isn't working, so I got to do it the old way here. All right, so some of this stuff I'm going to blow through, but maybe I got some different graphics y'all might like. Somebody asked when the season starts. It's June 1st. But we do have a new thing. May 15th, they start issuing their advisories from the National Hurricane Center. Those are those 2-day, and it used to be 5-day forecasts. Now there's 7-day forecasts. That's the areas that they highlight as, an invest area, they call it. So we'll start getting those in May 15th. But the fascinating thing I've found is dating back to 2015, we've always had a system in May. 15, 16, 17 was actually, 17 we had one in April. So it's not uncommon to get a system early. It doesn't mean we're going to have a busy season. People get all freaked out, the media, minus Channel 8. Oh my God, we got a season, storm in May. They come from old cold fronts usually, and it's not uncommon. We didn't have one last year, ironically, but we had one all the way back to 15. So it doesn't mean much. These old fronts sometimes get going. Peak season months, obviously, August, September, October. As Lee said, October is our time to worry. And I'll show you that here. I got a couple cool graphics on that. And there we go. All right, so here's your names. People like the names, so I always throw this slide in there. We're 2023. They recycle every 6 years, a little tidbit people find fascinating. They do retire names, storms that are, loss of life, devastation, money. Eyes, for some reason, Florida and I storms don't get along. Ivan, Irma, Ike, now Ian. So they've replaced Irma a few years back. Now we have Delia. So that'll be a new name for 2023. We did use Greek a couple years ago. They stopped doing that because they said it confused people. And that was in 2020. We had 21. So 2021 was our third most active season ever. And we only had one storm that people remember, and that was Ida.
So I'm going to talk about this whole theme of it only takes one. That's kind of my new focus, is to let people know it only takes one. Here's the forecast real quick. I do want to bring out something, though. Ironically, you might know Eric Burris from Orlando, but they predicted the top right, that was their prediction last year, using a new model, LRC. It's a long-range recurring cycle model. If you're sciencey, did very well. People laugh about it, but he did a really good job with that model, predicting Ian and Nicole. He came out with their forecast for this year, and again, they're showing Florida. Take it with a grain of salt, but I do believe it, and I'm going to show you why. As far as Florida, still in a hot spot this year because we're entering an El Nino year. There's the numbers, which she did already. And yeah, Jay told me like 10 to 15 minutes this time, so I cut out a lot of stuff. I'm over there trying to change it. I said, well, I'll just keep it simple this year. But anyway, here's the 2022 outlook. And now they called for 20 storms last year. We ended up with 14. So the point of this is, sometimes nobody knows, right? I mean, last year was supposed to be a really active season. We ended up with only 2 major hurricanes, supposed to be 5. So these preseason forecasts, I don't really get into them too much. We did have the longest stretch almost ever last year. If you remember, we didn't have a storm from July and August, so people kind of let their guards down, and then we had Ian and Nicole. So don't let your guards down. Another fascinating graphic here, if you didn't see it last year, Ian and Nicole happened exactly the same spots in 2004 that Charlie and Gene did. Same landfall almost to the T. And they were exactly 43 days apart, both of those storms those years. So it's kind of odd, I used to not really get into Mother Nature repeating herself, but I think there's a lot to that. And then I put this graphic out on social media a few years ago, just kind of joking about it. We're going to have 0 to 20 storms. It only takes one. 1992 is, as mentioned, it was an El Nino year. It didn't happen until the end of August. Everybody said, oh, season's dead, right? Next thing you know, boom, Category 5. So, don't fall asleep. We could have 30 storms. They could all be fish storms. But again, it only takes one. And your biggest risk is media minus Channel 8. All right. You know what I mean, hype. There's some media stations that love to hype national networks. All right, so your little history is kind of cool. It puts it in perspective. Florida hot spots, reoccurring storms. Now, this data is only through 2010, but, this is over a couple hundred years, they figured. So kind of lets you know that the Big Bend area, Jacksonville area gets, the most years in between storms, obviously South Florida. We're around 9 to 10 years we get a hurricane. Majors, actually, every 32 years. A little cool little tidbit there. Again, not a science. All right, this is a cool graphic showing you hurricanes that passed through Florida the last 50 years. We've had 23 hurricanes, and there they all are. You might recognize some of those names. Notice Florida West Coast. We don't have any close to us except for Ian and Charlie. And then another tidbit I pulled up on the graphic, we've had 191 storms in the last 100 years, including tropical storms and hurricanes. And then we got a graphic here for Pinellas County. Kind of interesting. I found a neat little tool. So I run a website, Spaghetti Models, and I'm always adding new links to it. And I found this awesome NOAA page. You can type in parameters. So here's Pinellas County, storms in the last 50 years that came close to us. And really haven't had any. Now, this doesn't include Ian, but you can almost follow the same line that Charlie took. But we just haven't had anything. Gene and Francis were the closest ones back in 2004. And then we had Aaron. I don't really remember that one, but, we really, knock on wood, right? There's nothing that has even come close to Pinellas the last 50 years. All right, so is the Tampa Bay area protected? Back to the Indian mound thing. I was like, oh, my God. But people believe this, right? There's mounds in Philippi Park, and who knows? But, with a big but, I always say that, people laugh. Not this time. But hurricane origin, the bottom left is a really important graphic that shows all of the Caribbean storms that hit us here close to Pinellas County. Almost always we get these Caribbean systems that Lee said, cold fronts are coming down and pull them up and turn them, and that's our spot to worry about. Usually end of the season storms, as exactly what Ian did. So it's, are we due? Yes, I just don't know when it's coming, but we've been so close so many times. Michael kept on trucking north, didn't have any influence in the upper steering to turn it. Ian and Irma turned it the last second, as did Charlie. But, late season systems definitely. And then the graphic on the other side is kind of like the other one. This shows you frequency of storms, showing that we kind of are in a little neutral zone. All right, and in 1921, we did have a hurricane hit, right? 1921, almost 101 years ago, we had Category 3 hit the Tampa Bay area. These are real surge values that were reported. And this whole Barry Island would probably be underwater. 7 foot was recorded. Hillsborough River had 10 foot. All that water pushed up in the bay. The worst case scenario is Tampa Bay getting all this water shoved up. It's going to happen one day. I got some graphics on that, but it's fascinating to look at the old pictures. My hometown, city of Oldsmar, was completely leveled. They had to rebuild it from the ground up, and that was because of surge. So we did have one, and like I said, Mother Nature will probably repeat herself. All right, so this is a big one to me lately, messaging challenges. Everybody likes the winds, the 3s, the 4s, the 5s. Nobody cares about a little old tropical storm or Category 1. They're all like, yeah, whatever. But we've had some of the worst. Look at Fort Lauderdale. So I wanted to bring that up. Fort Lauderdale last week. Everything just lined up perfectly, right? We had that warm Gulf Stream. It's already 82, 83 degrees. We had an upper level low, and it just sat right over Fort Lauderdale, and they had 2 foot of rain, right? It wasn't even a named system, and it was like 1 in a 1,000-year flood. So these tropical storms sometimes are worse than a hurricane because water is everything that you worry about with these things. You don't worry about wind as much. Florence was a great example. In South Carolina, they had $24 billion in damage, and it was only a 1. Another point that I always bring up is that hype ends early. It seems like, start of the hurricane season, everybody's geared up like we are right now, and then by the end of the year, everybody has hurricane hangover, I call it. Weather channels showing fall foliage, and then we get the big one in October every year. It seems like it. So don't let your guard down. Remember, our worst part of the year is usually later in the year. A lot of reference to Ada. I was out there storm chasing this one. It was my most fascinating experience ever because everybody went to bed that night just thinking it was going to be nothing more than a little thunderstorm. It was like the perfect storm. Everything lined up. We had a full moon that night. We had a higher tide cycle because of that full moon. It just angled perfectly. It paralleled our coast. It was 60 miles off the coast. And, people here, Joe, right? FEMA said they had over 1,000 homes reported some sort of flood damage from that storm. So again, it was a nothing storm. It was, 60 miles off our coast. And, it was a nightmare. I mean, I was driving up from Johns Pass and seeing Pinellas County sheriffs up and down every street with boats rescuing folks, and you got, old married couples, walking hand in hand with, 2 feet of surge. They're getting knocked on the door, It's scary. And we did have a death, I believe, because of electrical during that storm. So yeah, always remember, it doesn't have to be a big bad Category 1 or 2 or 3 to be devastating. And here's some footage. Well, these are some footage I took during Ada. But so another fascinating thing that happened last year. Obviously, we knew Ian was terrible, for our coast, meaning West Coast. But when it passed through the state, a lot of the coverage ends at landfall. They don't talk that much about the inland effects. And the rainfall that Ian brought to the middle of the state, a place like Arcadia, all the way over to Orange, Port Orange, people waking up 2-3 foot of water in their homes that weren't even expecting it because it was more of a rain event. And then the other side of it was the Daytona Beach area got completely destroyed. And all the seawalls, I don't know if you've really followed it or not, but almost all the seawalls are gone in Daytona Beach. And I kept hearing, because I went over there for Nicole, and that was a picture I took in one of those places. They're like, all that damage came from Ian. Well, Ian was only a tropical storm when it passed through the state. By that time, it was a tropical storm. So Ian caused a lot of damage, but everything lined up perfectly. The counterclockwise rotation, pushed in the winds, perfect storm again. And Daytona Beach is never going to be the same. It's sad, but they, just completely caught off guard. And it was only a tropical storm when it exited our state, both both times. So, but again, this is footage right here. This is John's Pass. You know, we had flood and rains, and this is all from Ada coming up. Just crazy. Nobody really even saw it coming. All right, what else we got here? Keep it short and sweet. All right, so we talked about El Nino, a weird phenomenon that happens in the Pacific, and it creates a lot of wind shear across the Caribbean. So I'm going to talk about why I think Florida definitely needs to pay attention. 2004 was an El Nino year. We know 2004 very well. 2018 was an El Nino year, and we know about Michael. So, you know, I'm afraid, you know, for us, you know, letting our guards down, thinking it's, you know, going to be a slower year because of El Nino, when in fact the Gulf of Mexico doesn't really feel these effects of this upper level wind shear. So the 2018 is a great example. This is all the hurricanes in 2018. It was an El Nino year, but you can see where all the storms, there wasn't any storms in the Caribbean, but Michael obviously started north of that, and then Florence was another storm that kind of went around that. And going back to, you know, Mother Nature repeating herself, during an El Nino year, Andrew formed kind of where Florence was. Florence is that purple line that ended up hitting Carolinas. Dorian was another El Nino year. Dorian came around and stopped, luckily, before Florida. And then, of course, Gene and Francis kind of did that same pattern. So I don't know if it's, you know, the Bermuda High gets shifted or what, but I see a pattern with these El Nino years of storms coming up. And, of course, the Gulf of Mexico you always got to worry about. And, of course, Michael was Category 5 during an El Nino year. So the other thing, but going back to Colorado State, so they look at things when they come out with their projections. Well, one of the things that they projected a lower amount of numbers is because of this El Nino, but then they turn around and brought the numbers back up because of the warmer waters. Well, again, that's what we have to worry about. Warmer waters right now are averaging 5, 8, 9 degrees above normal, and they have been the whole spring. So, you know, again, if we got to worry, you know, water's hot. And that's fuel, and that's something to think about. So these storms, rapid intensification, definitely something we're going to always worry about, regardless of El Nino and La Nina. Then we got this weird thing. I usually talk about it more, but the Gulf Stream is fascinating to me. They're called loop eddies, loop currents. It's an endless amount of warm water that gets pumped up into the Gulf of Mexico, and it seems like it's becoming more and more of a reason, like Ida and Ian utilize that. Okay, surge real quick. This is kind of cool to me. Just think of, you know, storms are counterclockwise. People always get mad because we're under a surge warning and we don't get anything. So here's my daughter. It's a good example. This is Tampa Bay, 17 and 16. So we had Hurricane Hermine go to our north, hit the panhandle, but all that water and winds pushed into the bay because of the storm's rotation. And then the same picture a year later, if you remember Irma and Ian, everybody was walking out in Tampa Bay like all the water was gone, right? It was the weirdest thing. It was like, I call it like the zombies. Everybody's out there like, whoa, look at this. And there's people out there scattered, like walking the bay during Irma, like, where's all the water? And that's because the storm was to our south, and it blew the water out of the bay. So that's the powerful effects of surge, depending on the angle of approach. The storm to our south, we don't get any surge. Storm to our north, we got to look out. There's these things called slosh maps. You can Google them. It just kind of just shows you where, you know, worst case scenario. Storm tide is added to that, something I learned a couple years ago. I didn't really realize it. Back to Ada. So you got the surge, you add the tide, then you add the waves, like Joe said, and we got, you know, bigger problems. So we got these markers by our house in Oldsmar, a mile from our house. We have one of those high water markers that red X is. That's kind of puts it in perspective that we could have that one day underwater. Let's see. All right, so here's Ian's storm surge. This is what happened to us, right? We were all thinking about evacuating. The storm was supposed to go to our, stay off the coast a little bit. Like 2 days before Ian, these are real life surge estimates showing pretty much all Tampa Bay would be underwater, worst case scenario. The storm tracked a little bit more to the south. All those heavy surges stayed. These are, you know, what they got down in Fort Myers area. We got nothing. Irma was the same thing. We were projected to get 6 to 10 feet, 5 to 8 feet. That would have been, you know, it would have been 8 times 3. And of course, the size of Ian was so big compared to Charlie. It brought in, you know, flooding surge all the way down to Naples. They pretty much didn't expect down there either. All right, cool. The end. So I always end it with this. It's pretty funny. My wife is one of the millions that get confused between a watch and a warning. I don't know what it is about it, if it's a W. So I always throw this out there just so you don't get confused. When we're under any sort of a watch, be it flood watch, thunderstorm watch, hurricane watch, it means you have the ingredients for a taco, okay? So you get the warning when you have the taco. So that's huge. You know, my wife thinks she gets confused. So a watch is when you have the ingredients for something, and a warning is when we actually have it coming. So one day you'll think of that when you go through Taco Bell. And there you go. That's it. So there's my house, Irma. I've lived through it all with you. And my favorite sign in the world, hurricane evacuation plan, grab beer, run like hell. So anyway, hope you enjoyed it. Any questions, please? Spaghetti models? I do spaghetti models, but we'll talk about that another day. Sir?
Awesome job, Mike. Thank you. We appreciate that. Mike's here with us since 2020, since we started doing this Hurricane Summit. Next up, we have Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council, and we're going to, after them, we'll have Lisa Foster with Pinellas County speak as well.
There has been a noticeable shift in the forecast track.
Forecasters say this storm could be one of the strongest ever to hit the Tampa Bay region.
Phoenix is now a Category 5 hurricane. It is a historic storm and unfortunately making a beeline right now for our area.
Oh my goodness.
And we have Category 1 Hurricane Phoenix just south of Jamaica now. Phoenix is currently expected to make landfall in the Yucatan Peninsula as a Category 2 storm. But of course, always, we are keeping a close eye on this system.
There has been a noticeable shift in the forecast track from the NHC overnight, which now brings Phoenix into our viewing area, possibly as a strong hurricane. Now is the time to begin those preparations, folks.
We have breaking news this morning if you're just joining us. The National Hurricane Center has upgraded our entire viewing area to a hurricane warning as Hurricane Phoenix is projected to make landfall as a major hurricane sometime tomorrow. Mandatory evacuations are in effect for all coastal regions. Forecasters say this storm could be one of the strongest ever to hit the Tampa Bay region.
We cannot stress enough how crucial it is that you finish your storm preparations tonight. Conditions will deteriorate rapidly tomorrow morning and evacuation routes will quickly become impassable. Please don't take this lightly and heed all evacuation orders.
Folks, this is unfortunately the worst case scenario unfolding for the Tampa Bay area. Phoenix is now a Category 5 hurricane with maximum sustained winds at 160 miles an hour, but wind gusts up to 200 miles per hour. This is catastrophic. It is a historic storm and unfortunately making a beeline right now for our area.
We have a live look right now at North Tampa and Polk Street. I believe this is near Kawa Coffee, and as you can see, the storm surge has completely inundated downtown.
Law enforcement now is reporting that all bridges have been cut off by storm surge. We're looking at up to 20 feet of storm surge in some spots.
We're trapped on the third floor of the Tampa General Hospital parking garage, and the storm surge is up to the second floor of the hospital.
St. Petersburg is essentially an island right now.
A viewer from Brooksville is reporting roofs being torn off of businesses there, so this is a very important reminder that this is not just a coastal storm. We are seeing significant wind damage well inland.
Unbelievable gusts coming through. Oh my goodness.
The damage this morning is unimaginable. The beaches are essentially gone.
The Howard Franklin Bridge is completely destroyed. I've never seen anything like this.
Officials are scrambling to clean up debris from local airports in order for supplies to be flown in. We are getting reports from Homosassa of residents trapped by downed trees.
There's not a single business that we've driven by that doesn't have significant damage.
Tampa General Hospital has told us that they are unable to receive any patients after the hospital suffered significant damage from wind and storm surge. The level of destruction out here is indescribable. It's going to be a very long road to recovery for the Tampa Bay area.
This particular video was a simulated Hurricane Cat 5 making landfall in Indian Rocks Beach. We did win an award with Joe's group from the governor at the Governor's Hurricane Conference last year. We also won a national award from the National Association of Development Organizations for the development of this particular video. Take hurricane season seriously. As it's been mentioned, it's been 102 years since we had a direct hit of a major hurricane in the Tampa Bay region. That was the Tarpon hurricane in 1921. At that time, ladies and gentlemen, there were 400,000 people living in the Tampa Bay region. Today, we have 3.8 million. So just think of the amount of people and of structures that are at risk. Now, don't let your guard down. Hurricane season, as has been mentioned, starts June 1. If I can quote Pinellas County Commissioner Janet Long, who's a former chair of the Regional Planning Council, and I really like this quote. She says that living in the Tampa Bay region, we truly live in paradise, but living in paradise comes with great responsibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief. Absolutely. Great presentation. Lisa, are you? All right. Lisa Foster's with Pinellas County Emergency Management. She's going to speak about insurance, correct?
Yes, Jenny asked me to come and talk about insurance. I'm actually with Public Works.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I work a lot with emergency management. I'm kind of all over the place. I work with the building department a lot as well. Raise your hand if you have some sort of insurance coverage for your home. Okay, raise your hand if you have flood insurance. Okay, raise your hand if you know exactly what your insurance policy covers. Okay, so there's the first message. Call your insurance agent and figure out what is covered. If you need more coverage, if you have too much coverage, they should be looking out for you. It's their job, your insurance agent's job, to look at your property and know what you need in coverage. So talk to your agents and find out exactly what's covered so you're not surprised after the fact. You know, there's been a lot of talk about Tropical Storm Eta. You guys are underwater over here, and a lot of folks did not have insurance. The ones that I spoke with that had coverage were able to get back on their feet a lot faster. But one really key message here is your flood insurance policy does not cover that loss of use. So you're paying your mortgage while you're out of your house having it repaired, but you also have to pay to rent a place to live in. So that's not covered. It's something you can purchase, and you can talk to your insurance agent about purchasing that. But because Eta wasn't a wind event, those homeowner policies didn't kick in, and that's where that loss of use coverage usually resides. So talk to your agents about that loss of use. How long are you going to be out of your house? It depends on what size storm it is, and you've heard the weather people here talk about the different size storms, and you know the prediction models, you know, they're ballpark, but they're not perfect. So when emergency management issues those evacuation orders, it's because of that timing. You need to get out when they say to get out. If it's a voluntary one, like with Tropical Storm Eta, that means they're looking at it and saying, we don't think there's going to be deadly surge, but we know those low-lying areas, like here, could possibly flood. And like Joe said, don't go walking outside because you see that water coming in and your car starts flooding. Don't do that. Hopefully in advance you moved your car to high ground because you've already got those messages from us. But make sure that you've got all your stuff lifted off the floor and things like that that are valuable for those smaller storms, which we see a lot more of here. So as far as insurance goes, FEMA switched over to risk rating 2.0 about a year ago. And when they did that, they started rating the premiums as actuary risk. So they're looking at the CAT models. They're doing it like the private industry has done it for years and years and years. So they're going to look at your house. You have your house on the ground, high risk. So there's a flyer back there, which we ordered these from FEMA, so this is a FEMA document. So how close to the flooding source is it? How close are you to the water? Barrier Island is another parameter that's in their rating. If you're on a barrier island, there's another additional multiplier. Other characteristics are going to be how high off of the ground it is. So you're looking at how close to the water, how high off the ground it is, and if you're on a barrier island, right? Those policies are going to be very expensive. Hopefully you rolled your NFIP policy onto the glide path, so it can only go up 18% per year until you reach that actuary rate. But these insurance rates are not cheap anymore, and the private industry is available in a lot of places, but they don't favor barrier islands. So if you find a private company willing to insure you over here, it might be pretty pricey. The other thing I want to talk about is the 50% rule, which Jenny talked to you a little bit about. That's called substantial improvement. Substantial damage is the official term. And when your building is damaged, or even if you just want to remodel and make improvements, think about what it's going to do to your insurance rate. On the back of this, it's going to say replacement cost value. So they're looking at the size of your house and the value of the building when they're calculating what your insurance rate's going to be. So if you have this house on the ground that's close to the water, that's on a barrier island, and you're adding on to it, increasing that square footage, and they have a picture here on the FEMA document. So now you have this house at high risk on the ground, you've expanded it, or you've remodeled it, you've increased the value of it, that replacement cost value is part of that premium. So think about these things when you think about, well, do I want to spend $100,000 to remodel, or is it better to just elevate? And, you know, there are elevation options, whether you do what do they call it, demolition mitigation, so you demo and you build new, or you can actually jack the whole house up. So think about that before you go and do these remodel projects, because the insurance rates are long-term and they're not coming down. So keep that in mind. What else? I noted a couple things here that I just want to circle back on. So the building codes. Lee talked about the pressure on the building, right? So you've got this house on the ground and you want to do an addition. Okay, so you put all your money into this house and now that pressure from that storm surge comes and takes it out. Or you build a new house, and because the maps here, they're probably maybe for a Cat 1 storm. So you build to this little Cat 1 storm. Well, now we get a Cat 2 and you've built on foundation walls. So you have the pressure of those waves against those walls, which are not designed for wave action. Only those V zones on the FEMA map are classified for wave action. So if you're building a new house, really think about that foundation. That's another piece of the insurance too. So if you do these post piles, piers, foundation, you have your breakaway walls, that pressure will knock the walls out like it's supposed to, and your house is still standing. And you saw this in Mexico Beach, right? The last house standing with that one. We see it down in Fort Myers too. So these buildings that were built properly on the post piles, piers, those walls got blown out. The ones that were on the ground, they were some of them were washed right off the slab. Some of them had big holes in the walls. I mean, they were destroyed. So when you go up, if you're building on those foundation walls, because the FEMA map says you can, you know, think about spending the extra money on a better foundation, because your house you're on a barrier island, right? So if you're building to the FEMA map, you're preparing for Cat 1. So think about building stronger when you start thinking about your remodels or building or anything like that. And it's going to help your insurance rates too. So, and also don't let your insurance lapse, because then it'll go to full risk rate. Yes. Right. Correct. Correct. You can buy the excess though. Right. So if you, obviously the houses are worth more than 250, but if you flood, like Tropical Storm Eta is a good example of this. You probably, if you're one of these slab on grades, you maybe spent $50,000 to do your repairs, because you're cutting your walls out 3 feet up and replacing all that drywall, and then contents, it depends on, you know, the value of your couches and all the things that you have in your house. But the pictures, and somebody mentioned pictures and videos, take those pictures before, take your inventory before. After the storm, you have to go in and know exactly what you're submitting for your insurance. So it's really hard to do after the fact. So if you have that list of all your contents in advance, it'll really help you in the long run. We had a lot of residents that didn't even know what to do. They're like, I don't even know what to do. Did you take pictures? No, I didn't. And then the demo company comes in and throws everything away. So they have no evidence of what they had. So the insurance can't pay you out if they don't know what you had. So the $250 is for the structure, and then they'll insure you for $100,000 for your contents. So maybe from Tropical Storm Eta, you know, your repairs on your house was $50,000, and then you had $10,000 worth of stuff that was damaged, rugs and things like that. Now, if we have one of these big ones coming at us, if it's irreplaceable, take it to high ground. And speaking of high ground, that's where the FEMA maps might prove useful. And I don't want to stand here and talk badly about the FEMA maps, but that's a map that reflects the probability that they came up with for that 1% annual chance storm event. And when you compare that to the slosh models, which emergency management uses for the evacuation zones, it's probably about a Cat 1 worst case scenario here. So, if you're building to the FEMA map and using that as your guideline for what building code to follow, it may not be okay for one of those larger storm surge events. So just think about that when you're thinking about planning. Now, where those FEMA maps might prove useful, though, is when you evacuate to the inland areas, those are not going to be evacuation zones because evacuation zones are only for storm surge. They're not for regular floodplains. So look at those maps if there's any shading. Even that orange shading on there, that's that 500-year storm, the bigger storm. And I was just down in Miami when all that rain happened and all that flooding happened. And it was really bad. Those were well into, the flooding was well into those 500-year floodplains. And it was with Ian too. So if there's any shading on that FEMA map, if it's an older building, maybe that's not where you want to go. You want to look for a newer building that's, outside of those blue areas on the FEMA map to where you're going to evacuate to. Yes. So that's up to the homeowner and the designer, right? So if somebody's coming, say you have one of your on-the-ground houses and you want to just elevate it. So they're going to come, they're going to do the hydraulic jacks, they're going to jack it up. What foundation you put in there, the minimum standard, Jenny and her team will tell you what that minimum standard is. If you're in the regular AE zone that's not the coastal A or the VE zone, they're going to say you can have foundation walls with your flood vents. But if you want that wave to be able to go through and not take the whole house out with it, then you might want to think about doing the post piles piers, even though it's not required. And you guys get a CRS discount too. And I mean, if Jenny's team and the town decided that they wanted to just go higher standards and do V-zone, just require everybody to be on post piles piers when they build back, they could do that. They get a bunch of CRS credit, which would help with the insurance discount. Anything else on the exciting topic of insurance? And these flyers are in the back. There's some Public Works pens and some wipes and stuff and some flyers out. I kind of scattered my stuff around, so.
Back to the pictures, because the first reaction when you're flooded is to pull everything out of your house because it's all wet. You want those pictures now to show that the condition that it is to the insurance company, because once they're wet, they won't look as nice as you want to get your money back. So just something about the pictures ahead of time, dry.
Yeah, and the pictures are what need to get submitted to the insurance. So the video is awesome, though, to show to the insurance adjuster. So like with Tropical Storm Ada, a lot of people were just at home. They climbed up on the beds or the couches or whatever because it was, less than a foot of water in most cases in folks' homes. So, the other thing, breaker boxes. Somebody mentioned electricity. Before, like right now, today when you go home, write on your breaker box what's what. And then if you have, say your laundry is in the garage, so it's a little bit lower than the house, put laundry turn off first. So before that storm comes in, your garage, it floods with heavy rainfall at high tide, right? So just turn that breaker off right away because otherwise, as soon as that water hits the washer and dryer, you've got charged water in that whole area. You can't step out there. And if you do, you're going to get electrocuted. So just mark your breaker boxes and then turn everything that's low off before that storm comes. And then, if you're looking out the window and you see it really creeping up, then you want to turn the rest of the breakers off too. I think that's it. I could talk all day. I won't.
Thank you, Lisa, from Pinellas County Public Works. My concern is fire and life safety. And in hurricane preparation, the homeowner's insurance, that's an aspect I personally don't really think about. So the entire aspect of hurricane preparation involves more than just, evacuations, getting some food and water for a few days. So that's another topic that you probably need to look into. We are running a little behind, but our next presentation, we're going to transition into the sea turtle protection and preservation aspect. We have Lindsay and Gabriella from Clearwater Marine Aquarium. While they're getting ready, we have, we'll have one more speaker after this, and I promise we will feed you guys lunch. Mike? Yes. Yes. So Mike, what he's saying is if you have a portable generator, obviously don't start it in the garage or in your living room, God forbid. Somebody mentioned, or actually Raul, you mentioned the carbon monoxide detectors. Once it detects that, you're behind the eight ball. So, absolutely. Yep. And you'd think at this day and age, with so much information out there about it, that it wouldn't happen. But, not to sound crude, but it's job safety for me.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Lindsay Flynn. I'm the manager of the Sea Turtle Conservation Program at Clearwater Marine Aquarium. We are your marine turtle monitors here in Madeira Beach. We monitor about 21 miles of beaches every summer for sea turtle nesting activity from Clearwater through Treasure Island. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about sea turtle nesting here in Pinellas County. Uh-oh, that's not working. Okay, so for those of you who do not know, sea turtles do nest on our beaches. We can get up to 3 species nesting here in Pinellas County. Our primary nesting species is called the loggerhead sea turtle. It's the 3rd largest species in the entire world of these 7 species that exist. That's an example of an adult female on the top left there, the cute little babies on the bottom, and the right image is, it's a little difficult to see, but that's the crawl track that the adults leave behind from nesting overnight, and that's what we look for in the early morning. So if you see us driving by in our ATVs, give us a wave. That's what we're looking for in the mornings. We can also get 2 other species. That's the Kemp's Ridley. That's the smallest and most critically endangered species. And the green sea turtle. We get those very rarely. We've gotten maybe a few in the last 15 years. So we're really excited when we get those ones. So what does the nesting process look like? Well, I'm going to explain it in terms of a loggerhead sea turtle because that's what we get most often. So that starts with the adult female coming out of the surf zone at nighttime, and she's going to crawl up the beach. She has flippers, not feet, so she has to drag herself up the beach somewhere between the high tide line and the primary dune. We don't really know what characteristics she uses to choose a nest site. Might have something to do with temperature, proximity to the dune, chemical composition of the sand. We really don't know. But once she does that, she's going to prepare her nest site. So she's going to use her front flippers to move away the soft surface sand and create a shallow depression called a body pit. Once she does that, she's going to create something called an egg chamber. So she's going to use her rear flippers and she's going to curl them in like a shovel. She's going to dig a hole that looks like an upside down light bulb. And once she can't pull out any more sand, because she does that by feeling, not by sight. Once she can't pull out any more sand, she's going to start laying her eggs. And loggerhead sea turtles can lay usually somewhere between 80 and 120 eggs per nest. They lay multiple nests per season. So they can lay anywhere between 1 and 8, usually closer 4 to 5. So 4 to 5 nests in a season with 80 to 120 eggs in each is a lot of work. So she does not nest every year. She nests every 2 to 4 years. After she's done, she's going to work backwards. So she's going to cover those eggs with her rear flippers with sand, and then she's going to cast sand with her front flippers, sort of camouflaging the site and the scent of the nest. That's to camouflage it from our land predators like coyotes and raccoons that would love nothing more than to dig up our nests and eat our eggs. So once she's done with that, she's going to turn around and she's going to go back towards the water. They don't provide any sort of maternal care for their eggs. They'll come back on land 2 weeks later, but only to lay another clutch of eggs, not to provide any sort of care for the nest she already laid. That nest is going to incubate underneath the sand for about 2 months, and then our hatchlings are going to emerge about 2 months later, hopefully together, and hopefully go directly towards the water. We're going to talk very briefly about why that won't happen in just a couple minutes. So what can everybody do to help our sea turtles nest successfully? Two biggest things people can do is one, reduce the number of obstructions that are on our nesting beaches during the season, and two, reduce the amount of light pollution so we can reduce the number of disorientations that occur. Obstructions. So sea turtles don't see very well on land. They see about as well on land as we do underwater, which is to say not well at all. So when they come ashore, they're not expecting to encounter stuff like those pop-up tents that get left on the beach or the pile of chairs and toys that people might leave overnight. So if they encounter that, they're more likely to leave the beach without laying their eggs. It's called a false crawl or a non-nesting emergence. It's true that she can come ashore maybe later that same night or within the next couple of nights and try again. But if she keeps encountering stuff like this night after night, she may decide to just sort of let her eggs go in the water. And then they are no longer viable. And that's a problem because Florida hosts more than 90% of all loggerhead sea turtle nesting in the United States, so we're a really important nesting site. On top of that, the state of Florida is one of two primary nesting locations in the entire world for loggerhead sea turtle nesting. The other location is the country of Oman, which is in the Arabian Peninsula next to Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Unfortunately, the country of Oman has been experiencing up to a 79% decline in loggerhead nesting in the recent years. So that arguably makes the state of Florida, little old Florida, the #1 nesting site for loggerheads in the entire world. So what affects our population of turtles is going to affect the global population of loggerhead sea turtles. Really important that we get our nesting females to lay their eggs and we get them, our babies, to the water as much as possible. Because even if we manage to get these hatchlings to the water, only 1 in 1,000 will make it to adulthood. That's 0.1%. That is not much. So we need to do everything that we can. And these are simple things. It's as simple as removing our trash, removing our items, filling in our holes, and knocking down our sandcastles. That helps turtles a lot. So these are just a few more examples where turtles encountered stuff. July 4th week is the rough one for us. Same thing with our sandcastles and our holes. You can see that they crawled right up to or into them. Fortunately, our adults are usually capable of getting out of them, but you can imagine a 3-inch long hatchling falling into a hole. It's like falling into the Grand Canyon for them. They cannot get out. So either they get desiccated by the sun or they get predated by birds, coyotes, raccoons. They don't do well. So please fill in your holes, knock down your sandcastles, and remove your items. So what about artificial lighting? So this is a nighttime image of the state of Florida. You can see we are very well lit. We're on par with the Miami-Dade area, Orlando, which is in the middle of the state, Jacksonville. We're the most densely populated county for humans in the entire state of Florida. So that means we have a lot of light on at night for our tourists and our residents alike for safety, security, all that important stuff. But how does that affect our turtles? Well, under natural conditions, turtles use brightness as a guide to find the water. Celestial light like moonlight and starlight are bouncing off the water and creating a nice bright horizon, and that's contrasting with the darkness of the land. So they're able to follow that brightness right to the water. Now, in our area, it's very well developed and we use a lot of artificial light at night. They're going to go to whatever source of light is brighter. So if our artificial light is brighter than our celestial light, they're going to go towards that. We're going to find them in areas they shouldn't be. The fire department has helped us several times getting them out of storm drains, pools, hot tubs, parking lots, in Gulf Boulevard run over by cars. It happens every year. We had an adult cross the road last year because of artificial light. So the standing rule for artificial light is if you can see it on the beach, so too can our turtles. So we need to do something about it. This is just a quick example of an adult female disorientation. So here I highlighted the crawl track of the female, and she is crawling toward you in the image. And way back there, that is where our nest site was. That's a Ford F-150. That is a large truck on the beach. That's really far away. So she spent a lot of time on the beach trying to find the water again. Remember, we talked about as soon as she's done nesting, she's out of there. She needs to go to the water. The fact that she was spending so much time on the beach after nesting tells us that there was a lighting problem. And she only has so much energy to lay those nests. So the more time she wastes on the beach is the less energy she has to lay another nest. So she may not lay that last nest at the end of the season, and we need her to. So I'm going to just quickly go over these pictures only because these are the consequences of using artificial lights. We find our adults and our babies in the roadway. They get run over by cars every year. And if they don't manage to make it to the roadway, they are wasting precious energy on the beach. And they are now desiccating in the sun. They are getting predated by coyotes and raccoons. Hatchlings only have a finite amount of energy in these yolk sacs that they have. That's the energy that they have to find the water and swim offshore for about 36 hours to find this surface patch of seaweed. It's called the sargassum weed line. That's where they grow up their first few years of life. If they don't have that energy because they're wasting it on the beach, they could drown and they could not make it to the sargassum and they could be predated by fish and birds and other things. It's really important that we get them to the water as soon as we can. This is just an example of a hatchling disorientation. So that's the location of the nest site there. You can see the water in the background where they should have gone. This is where they actually went. So they all went landward. That's the exact opposite of what we want. So we know that there was a lighting issue back here. So there's something we can do about it. We encourage our beachfront and our beachfront properties and our properties visible from the beach to use something called sea turtle friendly lighting. There's a motto that says, keep it long, keep it low, and keep it shielded. We want to use, to get us technical for just a second, we want to use a long wavelength light. So that's LED light that emits amber, orange, or red light. We want to use the lowest lumens or wattage for the purpose necessary, and we want to mount it as low to the ground as possible so that the light source doesn't reach the beach. And then we want to shield that light source from being seen from the beach. That will allow our turtles to orient correctly. And we need all of those three things met in order to be considered sea turtle friendly. So this is what a sea turtle friendly property looks like. So on the left, you can see this home. It was up in the Panhandle, very brightly lit with white light, a lot of interior light that can be seen from the beach as well. That's very bad for our turtles. They're very attracted to that. On the right, that's retrofitted to sea turtle friendly light. So we're certainly not asking people to turn their lights off because people need light to move about their property safely. But we're just asking them to change to an LED light that emits the amber, orange, or red spectrum and down face it and shield it so it can't be seen, the point source can't be seen from the beach. Turtles are less sensitive to this light, so they'll be able to orient properly, just like they would in a dark beach, so they can orient very well. It just looks like a different color to us, right? It's just an orange light. Who cares? Well, I'm going to show you that there is a difference. So Gabriella passed out a pair of turtle goggles to you, and I want you to use them in just a second. But first, I want you to use just your regular eyes, and I want you to look at a couple of light sources. I don't want you to look directly at the light because I don't want to blind you, but, you know, kind of look at it. So this is a white light that could be seen on any exterior property on the beach, so just look at that with your regular eyes. This is an example of a sea turtle friendly light. So it's on, it's emitting amber light. It's in an enclosed fixture and it's downward directed to where we need it to be. Now I want you to use your special turtle goggles and I want you to look at the lights through that blue filter. So you're gonna see what a turtle sees. So look at the white light first. Can you see it? Right? Yeah. Ooh, that's where the water is, right? No, you're gonna get stuck in a parking lot if you go to this light. All right. Now I want you to look at this light. Can you see it? No, you can't. What about now? Yeah, they're less sensitive to that light, so there is a difference. So we can still see it and move about our property just fine, but they are less sensitive to that and they can orient correctly. Flashlights and cell phone lights are a problem too. Just like any other exterior property light, they can be disoriented by those cell phone lights and those flashlights. So we ask people to please not use that if you can help it. Your eyes do a really good job of adjusting to the night, but we understand that some people don't feel safe with that, so we ask them to use one of these. This is a headlamp that is available at most local hardware stores. They have a red light option. This is an LED red light. Turtles are less sensitive to this, but we can still use it to move about the beach just fine. So we encourage people to go to the hardware store and purchase one of these for about $10 to $15. If you see a sea turtle this season and you have a concern about a nest, the turtle itself, somebody's maybe, fussing with one of our nests or something. Just so you guys know, this is what it'll look like. We'll have wood posts installed on the beach with these yellow signs and these blue signs here. That will tell you that there is a sea turtle nest there. So if you see somebody around our nest and you're concerned about it, you can call the FWC Wildlife Alert Hotline. That's that first number on the top. That number is good anywhere in the state of Florida, so if you happen to be on the other coast during the summer, you can call that number as well. Clearwater through Treasure Island, you can call our CMA Rescue Hotline. You can see all the signs that you see there. Those are installed on every single public access in the city of Madeira Beach. We appreciate the city for installing those. And like I said, you'll see these blue signs here on every single one of our nests. So it gives you a quick do's and don'ts of the nesting season, and it gives you those phone numbers to call if you have a concern. But I will say, if you do see somebody messing with a sea turtle, someone's touching a female, someone's picking up a hatchling, that is against state and federal law. Please call 911 and get the police out there so they can handle the situation until they can get us out there to handle it, okay? All right, that's all I got for you. So thank you so much for letting me speak today.
Appreciate that, Lindsay. I can speak for the fire department. We actually keep a net on our truck because we're called to sewer drains and what have you all the time to assist them with, sea turtles or hatchlings that were disoriented. Next, and our final presenter is Skylar with the National Wildlife Federation. Huh? They're not in here. Sorry.
She slipped out for lunch. All right, well, hopefully this will be quick so we can all eat, but I apologize. I'm going to be reading from this paper to make sure I don't miss anything. But my name is Skylar Garza. I am the Sea Turtle Intern for the National Wildlife Federation's Golf Program. National Wildlife Federation is a nonprofit focused on uniting all Americans to ensure wildlife thrives in a rapidly changing world. My team across the Gulf specifically focuses on climate resilience, habitat protection, and marine environments. Here in Florida, we work on climate communications in Tampa Bay, restoring habitats like the Everglades, advancing policy for wildlife at the state level, and working to improve sea turtle nesting habitats. I work primarily on our sea turtle project with our partners at Sea Turtle Conservancy, which works to assist communities and local governments to update their sea turtle lighting ordinance language to be closer to an ideal model created in 2020. So during lunch, you're going to see a short 20-minute film that we have created, and this is just a quick trailer for that film, and that will be it from me. If it'll load, hopefully.
Here on the Gulf Coast, communities know they're the front line of sea level rise.
We're seeing more water. We're seeing more frequent storms. We're seeing the ferocity of storms increase. We're seeing rainfall dumps.
We have to make people knowledgeable, get them engaged.
We can't just sit back and allow those changes to happen. We want to be in the best shape to adapt.
There's a lot of things we can do, and we ought to do, to make ourselves protected and more resilient and to live with a changing climate.
So like I said, that's just the trailer, and the full film is 20 minutes, which will be showed once we eat, and that is it from me. Thank you.
Tyler. All right, now we have our final presenter. We have Trash Turtles, correct? You founded this organization, right? Yep. All right.
Good afternoon. What time is this? Yeah, good afternoon. My name's Camus Maxon. I am the founder and CEO of Trash Turtles. And Trash Turtles is my nonprofit. I started this when I was 10 years old, and my mission, and I started this also with my best friend, is saving the planet one piece of trash at a time. And this all became kind of a thing when I got told in the 4th grade that you, Camus, you got to do a community service project for school. So I was like, okay, fine, I'll do the community service project. So I go out and I'm looking for this project and I need some inspiration. So I go out and I notice that there's this big tractor with the rake on it. You might have seen it outside with all their utility vehicles, and it happened like an epiphany almost. I was like, I got my project because the rake is raking your necessary seaweed along with your microorganisms back to the water's edge once they wash up on the shore. But the problem is that trash will also get intertwined with that seaweed and will also be brought back to the water's edge to be washed out with the tide, which was not an ideal solution to the trash problem on our beaches. So I contacted the mayor, not the current mayor, a couple mayors ago, and she told me, come to the city council meeting and we'll discuss this. So I stood up there, my 10-year-old me self, with all my family, all my friends, all my teachers, and state my claim about how we need to protect our environment and how all this trash putting in is not taking any trash out of our environment, it's just recycling it back into this really cycle of waste. So I stated my claim, and the city considered some of my ideas, but I started Trash Turtles at that point to make a difference, even when people were still like standing around going, what are we doing now? So I'm still here making a difference, and I've grown with great partners with the city, and I really enjoy working with them, and fire department, and Trash Pirates, if you've heard of them. They had a stand out there. They're super nice people, and I've grown to do so many really enjoyable things. I do scholarships. Actually, currently we're running our Hope Scholarship. That's the name of the turtle that we're currently doing. It's a $1,000 scholarship to any willing high school senior who's doing really good for our environment. The rest of that information is on our website at trashturtles.org. Our slogan is Leave with 3, which means wherever you are and you see trash, pick up 3 pieces, and if we can all do that, we can save our planet. So that is Trash Turtles in a nutshell, and thank you for your time and thank you for listening.
Do you have social media? Yes. All right, so follow the Trash Turtles on social media. They put out whenever they do trash pickups, and you guys have been working collaboratively with the Trash Pirates as well, correct? Yeah, I know I've participated in a few of them myself. That concludes our program today. Feel free to follow us across the breezeway, and we'll have some lunch. Thank you, everybody, for attending.